Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Drums and Drams. My name's Cameron and today we've got another blind whiskey review here on the channel. In today's video, I'm just gonna reach my hand over into my blind sample box, pull out a random blind sample. This one is B253066. And as I get this poured out into my glass, I will put a reminder along the bottom of the screen of what it is I'm gonna be taking a look at in today's video. I'm gonna be giving you a full review, nose, palate, finish, and a rating out of 100 before I ever find out what this whiskey is. And in order to do that final reveal at the end of the video, I'm realizing now that I don't have my stack of reveal cards right here. They're somewhere behind me because, as you guys can see, I've been taking everything out of this room, moving it to the new house, setting up the new studio over there, and I don't know where I put the reveal cards. So we're gonna make a hard cut right here so I can go ahead and find this whiskey's reveal card. Okay, so I've got the reveal card now for this mystery whiskey. Color on this is pretty typical stuff, typical amber sort of color. Coated the glass, little swirl here. Let's go to the nose now and see what we get. All right, so first impression on the nose. This is a nutty and very oaky whiskey. I feel like there's some decent age to this on the nose. I'm getting like some brown sugars that are kind of like, mingling well with the oak. If you guys have ever had that experience on maybe like a Heaven Hill or a Jim Beam product, sometimes you can get heavy oak presence. You can get a lot of brown sugar that kind of goes with that. And so I think this is kind of like a darker, more caramelized sweetness that you get on the nose, but it's also in some ways like bittersweet because you get this kind of nuttiness sitting on the top of it. And it just has like somewhat of a bitter sort of profile with it as well. I think things are kind of balancing out here, but it's more in that darker kind of, darker Kentucky bourbon with some age sort of profile realm, at least after that first nosing. Let's go back in and dig a little deeper. Yeah, so as I continue nosing this, what I'm starting to pick up more of is kind of like a chocolate note that's starting to balance out some of that nuttiness that I'm getting. The nuttiness is bright. It's a little bit jarring in some ways, bitter, jarring. You can get some of that from maybe like some peanut notes and also maybe a little bit of like walnut characteristic in here too. But there's a little chocolate to kind of add like some sweetness, add a little bit of depth to that kind of that nutty profile that's really the top note to this whiskey. And then, as I kind of like search for something else in here, I feel like you could tell me that there's a dark fruit and I would believe you. Maybe like a fig, like a hint of a fig note in the background, but this is definitely not a fruity whiskey overall. I think this is much more focused on heavy oak notes, heavy brown sugar, lots of nuttiness sitting on the top with kind of like this bitter bite that balances everything out. So I'm gonna go to the palate and see if maybe there's a little more complexity on the palate, but I think the nose for me, it's not complex. It's very strong. It's a little bit abrasive in some ways because I think this is gonna have a decent proof to it. That's the way it smells at least. And so I'm hoping for more complexity on the palate than there is on the nose, or maybe just a drinking experience that's gonna blow me away because the nose is good, but it's not great. So here we go, cheers. Wow, okay, so the first sip of this whiskey is pretty different actually than what I was getting on the nose. Like the components of the nose are still there. I'm not gonna say that it completely changed, but the amount of extra stuff that I'm getting on the palate as compared to the nose is pretty significant. So for me, yes, I still get those chocolate notes that I talked about kind of balancing out the nuttiness. And yes, there is quite a bit of nuttiness still here on the palate. Lots of oak as well. But the profile actually goes like more into tiramisu land. Like there's a little mocha, little coffee kind of thing here with almost a vanilla or whipped cream sort of sweetness that kind of coexists with that bittersweet, sort of coffee thing. So I'm really getting like this tiramisu note on the palate and also some clove. So it's leaning even heavier into this bittersweet baking spice world. Whereas the nose felt, I guess, in comparison, maybe a little bit brighter even though the nose was dark and oaky and all that kind of stuff, brown sugars, the palate just goes even more into that territory. And I do like it. I don't think it's a great whiskey, and it's not just because of the profile. It also drinks in a way where I feel like it kind of falls off a little bit early, but that's a lot to talk about on the first sip. I think I do like the whiskey. I think the profile is actually pretty darn good. I'm glad the profile opens up this way on the palate as compared to the nose. Still for me, I feel like I'm in maybe the low 80s for a rating. We're gonna find out. Let's go in for a second sip now. Yeah, guys, this one is tough for me because the more I sip it, the more I am just loving the profile of this whiskey, but the more I am disliking the drinking experience. I think it is falling flat, kind of falling apart a little bit on the palate, but it's getting darker and more coffee and more bittersweet. And I love, honestly, just for me, I love bittersweetness in bourbon. I love when you get into that coffee territory. Like you go even further than oak and chocolate, you get coffee, you get that bitterness. It's just got this bite that keeps it interesting on the palate. I love that. Now, when you go too far with that, you get Detling and you get some other really crafty profiles that are good, like in moderation for me. It's not something I would reach for all the time, but I would reach for this whiskey all the time. I think it tastes great. It's a little dry, slightly tannic in the finish, but I think that's just a byproduct of the profile leaning into those more dry / bittersweet flavors. I think it's appropriate for this whiskey, but it's just that drinking experience overall. So like in my mind, like the profile is like an 87, you know, on my rating scale. Like I love this profile, but the drinking experience is like an 80 to 81. And so I'm trying to figure that out in my mind. It's putting me in that like 82, 83, 84 range as far as me giving this a rating. And maybe I'm like obsessing a little bit too much right now over the rating of this whiskey. I think what I'm gonna say right now before I take a third and final sip, because I think I need that, I think I need to collect my thoughts before I assign a number and do the reveal. I think the last thing I'm gonna say is that if this whiskey is $100, I actually think it's a pretty good value for what it is, because I think it's a very unique and kind of like well-developed profile for a whiskey, no matter what the proof is, no matter who the distiller is or anything like that. I think it's a well-developed profile. There are elements of youth on the nose, but also of age on the nose. And then you go to the palate and it gets very aged feeling. So it's a little confusing. It's a little bit like kind of all over the place, I guess. But I'm gonna do this third and final sip and then we're gonna, wrap things up here. On that final sip, I'm starting to get a little more nuttiness, starting to get maybe a little bit more youth shining through. So I'm gonna drop my rating down. I'm gonna err on the side of a lower rating here. I'm gonna go 82 out of 100. And I'm torn. I'm just so curious to see what this is. I feel like I've talked maybe a little too much in this video already, and I'm probably gonna have to talk through this debrief after I find out what it is. But I hope it's $100 or under, and I would be very happy about this. So let's see what this is. Wow. Wow. Okay. This is a humongous surprise for me, honestly. This is the James E. Pepper Decanter Bourbon Batch 92. I am completely shocked. Hang on one second. I have to smell this. This makes sense on the nose now. Let me take one more sip. Wow, okay. I am totally shocked. Batch 92 James E. Pepper. I'm trying to look. I have the bottle. Let me grab it. Just one second. All right, so I actually grabbed 2 bottles of this James E. Pepper decanter. One of them is the same batch that I've been tasting here, batch 92. And I'm gonna get a little extra pour. I'm gonna refill my glass here. But the other is batch 11. And the reason I grabbed this batch 11 is because a year, maybe even 2 years ago on the channel, I did a video that was called something like, is this a Blanton's alternative or is it all hype? And it was about this particular bottle, that at least that's the one I reviewed, but it was really just a video about all these James E. Pepper decanters and whether or not they were Blanton's alternatives. And the reason I did that video is because at the time, people were saying, hey, listen, these are the same price as Blanton's. Since then, Blanton's has gone up in SRP, but it was the same price, higher proof, similar-ish age statement, and it had kind of like this fancy decanter look to it. It's not as cool as Blanton's, at least in my opinion, as far as like seeing that bottle shape and really being like, wow, this is a cool thing. I think this is a step down from Blanton's, but it was kind of being talked about in that same sort of category, I guess. So I did that video. That video at the time on the channel did very well, which was kind of cool. And so I bought this second batch of James E. Pepper, and it was gonna be like, hey, I'm revisiting this, thing I did 2 years ago about, is this a Blanton's alternative? Is James E. Pepper good or not? And it was gonna be a revisit. Well, now we're doing that revisit because this just popped up in this blind sample. And so I actually did not like James E. Pepper before this tasting. Like I would have never in a million years thought I would give it the rating that I did in this video. But I don't think, I don't know. I just don't think I've done this comparison side by side like this. Maybe on a live stream once, maybe in my own time once, but I don't remember the results if I did this comparison. So let's very quickly check the batch consistency, because I think these are pretty small batches, because there are a lot of them. This is batch 92 of this James E. Pepper stuff. So I'm gonna taste batch 92 one more time. And as I taste it, I recognize the same nuttiness that I talked about. It was on the nose. It's a little bit on the palate, more prominent on the palate as I sipped it, but it had this kind of nice tiramisu thing that was developing, you know, as I sipped it, this great bitter sweetness that I talked about. Now let's go to batch 11, quickly on the nose. It smells younger. It's like a little more corn grain and honey forward, which honestly like reminds me more of that Blanton's sort of, you know, Mash Bill 2, spicier because Mash Bill 2 is a higher rye content, like spicier Blanton's sort of profile with a little bit more cinnamon in there. Still that kind of Buffalo Tracy sort of honey. Yeah, I think this batch 11 has more of that Blanton substitute profile to it, and batch 92 on the nose is much more well developed. So there is quite a difference between these on the nose. Let's go batch 11 on the palate now. It's not close. It is not even close. Now, I don't know if James E. Pepper is letting this whiskey age and just like putting older whiskey in their, you know, subsequent batches. This says bottled by James E. Pepper, James Pepper Distilling on the back. On the front, it says distilled at the historic James E. Pepper Distillery. So I think this is their own distillate. That is a plus, and that does lend itself to the theory then that I would probably make right now, which is this is younger and this is maybe older stuff. Same whiskey, just allowing it to age up and putting older stuff in their batches. I don't know, but at least in this, you know, quick comparison between batch 11 and batch 92, there is a marked difference between the profiles of these, the drinking experiences of these. They're both very similar proofs, 53.8 for batch 11, and even lower, 53.2 for batch 92. Batch 92 is fuller, spicier, it drinks a little bit better, less youth, more well-developed overall. And I think the score I gave it at this point is entirely appropriate. So let me know what you guys think of these James E. Pepper decanters. If you've had the chance to side-by-side any of these batches, especially if there's like 80 batches between the two you've side-by-sided, this was a telling experience for me. So check it out for yourselves. Like, comment, subscribe, cheers, and I'll see you next time here on Drums and Drams.